I never thought I'd be the guy posting his life's wreckage on a subreddit, but here we are. My name is Caleb. I'm a structural engineer, which means I'm paid to notice when things are slightly off-center. A millimeter of lean in a load-bearing wall, I see it. A fraction of a degree in a foundation shift, I feel it. But apparently when it came to the structural integrity of my own marriage, I was legally blind. I've been married to Sloane for 7 years. She's an interior designer, all soft textures, muted palettes, and an uncanny ability to make a cold room feel like a sanctuary. And then there's Gideon. Gideon has been my brother since sophomore year of college. He's a contractor, rugged, dependable. The kind of guy who shows up with a toolbox and a six-pack before you even realize your faucet is leaking. Last year, we bought a fixer-upper in the suburbs of Connecticut. It was supposed to be our project. But my firm sent me on a massive infrastructure job 3 states away. I was gone 4 days a week. Gideon, being the saint he is, offered to help Sloane manage the renovations while I was away. "Don't worry about the costs, Cal," he told me, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "I'll do the labor for free, just pay for the materials. You do the same for me." I thanked him. I hugged him. I literally handed him the keys to my kingdom. The help started small, a kitchen backsplash, retiling the master bath. But then, the house started changing in ways that weren't on the blueprints. I'd come home on Friday nights, and Sloane would be glowing, talking about Gideon's vision for the sunroom. She started wearing silk robes around the house, even when he was just finishing up in the basement at 9 p.m. The first red flag wasn't a lipstick stain or a hidden text, it was a smell. Gideon smokes a very specific, expensive brand of hand-rolled tobacco from a shop in the city. One Friday, I walked into our bedroom, our private sanctuary, and the scent was faint but unmistakable. It was embedded in the curtains. "Was Gideon in here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Sloane didn't even flinch. She was smoothing out the duvet. "The crown molding was warping," she said, her back to me. "He had to check if the humidity from the shower was leaking through the wall. He's a perfectionist, Caleb, you know that." I wanted to believe her, I needed to. But then I noticed the renovations were getting oddly specific. Gideon installed a high-end security system, ring cameras, motion sensors, the works. He told me it was a housewarming gift to keep Sloane safe while I was on the road. What I didn't know was that he hadn't given me the master admin login. He said there was a glitch in the firmware, and he'd fix it next week. For 3 months I lived in a house that was being rebuilt by a man who was systematically replacing me. He wasn't just fixing the pipes, he was rerouting the entire flow of my life. I started noticing small things missing. My favorite whiskey was always an inch lower than I remembered. My side of the bed felt used, not slept in, but sat upon, contemplated. The breaking point was the smart mirror Gideon installed in the master bath. It was a masterpiece of tech, weather, news, lighting control. Sloane loved it. One night, while she was asleep, I couldn't sleep. I went into the bathroom to splash water on my face. I looked at the mirror, and in the dim glow of the LED trim I saw a smudge, a handprint. Not on the surface, but seemingly behind the glass, near the frame. I'm an engineer. I know how these units are mounted. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen junk drawer. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I loosened the bracket, expecting wires and insulation. Instead, I found a hollowed-out cavity in the drywall. Inside was a small black device. It wasn't a sensor for the mirror. It was a high-gain microphone and a wide-angle lens, positioned perfectly to see the bed through the open bathroom door. My best friend hadn't just been helping with the house, he had been tuning it. He turned my home into a stage, and for months I had been the only person in the audience who didn't know the script. I didn't confront them then. I couldn't. I felt like if I screamed, the whole house, his house now really, would swallow me whole. I put the mirror back. I sat on the floor and waited for the sun to rise, realizing that every repair Gideon made was actually a way to watch me lose everything in high definition. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the tub, looking at that smart mirror like it was a tombstone. My best friend Gideon hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He had been digitizing the conquest. He was a contractor after all. He knew the studs, the wiring, the dead spaces behind the drywall better than I did. He hadn't been fixing our home. He had been converting it into a private theater, where I was the only one not holding a ticket. The next morning, I did something I'm not proud of, but something necessary for survival. I didn't scream. I didn't pack a bag. I made coffee. I even kissed Sloane on the forehead before she woke up fully. She smelled like expensive lavender, and there it was again, that faint metallic tang of Gideon's rolling tobacco. It was on her skin. It was in the fibers of our Egyptian cotton sheets. "Gideon's coming over at 10, she murmured, stretching like a cat that had just finished a bowl of cream. "He says the HVAC in the basement is vibrating. He wants to dampen the sound before it ruins the foundation." "Of course he does," I said, my voice as steady as a structural beam. "He's a good man, Sloane. We're lucky to have him." I left for work, but I didn't go to the site. I went to a high-end electronics store 2 towns over. I bought a thermal imaging camera, the kind we use to detect heat leaks in industrial piping. If Gideon was hiding hardware in my walls, he couldn't hide the heat signatures of the processors. I waited until I saw Gideon's black Raptor pull into my driveway on our Ring app, the one he thought I couldn't fully access. I had spent the morning brute-forcing the admin passkey. He'd used the date of his first construction license. Predictable, arrogant. I watched the feed from my phone, sitting in a parked car 3 blocks away. I watched my best friend walk through my front door without knocking. I watched my wife meet him in the foyer, her silk robe loosely tied. They didn't even make it to the bedroom. Right there, in the hallway, Gideon had refloored last month. They collapsed into each other. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a routine. But I didn't look at their faces. I looked at the background of the video. I noticed Gideon glancing at the smoke detector in the hallway. He winked at it. He was recording it for himself. He was building a library. I spent the next 4 hours using my thermal camera from the crawl space while they were busy upstairs. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree on my screen. Small hot squares behind the crown molding. A warm pulse inside the grandfather clock I'd inherited from my father. Gideon hadn't just put a camera in the bathroom. He'd wired the entire house into a closed-circuit loop that bypassed our Wi-Fi and went straight to a local server. Where was the server? I tracked the cables. They didn't go to the office. They went to the basement, specifically to the new sound-dampening enclosure Gideon was building around the HVAC unit. It was brilliant. The noise of the furnace would mask any humming from a server rack. The vibration would hide the spinning of hard drives. I crept into the basement while I heard them laughing in the kitchen above me. They were making lunch. I heard the clink of wine glasses, my vintage Bordeaux, no doubt. I opened the HVAC panel. There it was, a sleek black NAS, network-attached storage unit, tucked behind a false layer of acoustic foam. I plugged my laptop into the maintenance port. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the cable. The folders were organized by date. Master bed, kitchen, living room, and a folder simply titled Caleb. I clicked it. It wasn't footage of me. It was a collection of my financial documents, scanned and uploaded. My life insurance policy, my 401k details, my structural engineering certifications. Gideon wasn't just taking my wife. He was preparing a dossier to take my career, my money, and my freedom. There were even photoshopped images of structural defects in the projects I was currently managing, the kind of stuff that would get my license revoked and put me in prison for criminal negligence if a building ever collapsed. He wasn't just a home wrecker. He was a parasite who had decided to kill the host and take over the shell. I heard footsteps above, the heavy thud of Gideon's work boots. "Sloane, babe, I'm just going to check the pressure on the boiler," he shouted. I had 30 seconds. I didn't pull the plug. I didn't delete the files. Instead, I injected a small, dormant script I'd written for my firm's data security audits, a Trojan that wouldn't activate for another 48 hours. Then I slipped out through the cellar window just as the basement door creaked open. I stood in the rain outside, looking at my beautiful, renovated home. It looked perfect from the outside, but I knew exactly where the rot was. And I knew that if you want to bring down a structure that's been compromised, you don't use a hammer. You use a controlled demolition. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching the raindrops race down the windshield. I could have walked in there. I could have used the tire iron from the back seat to settle the score right then. But that's what a man who's lost his foundation does. An engineer? An engineer waits for the right moment to pull the pin. Gideon thought he was the architect of my ruin, but he made one fatal mistake. He assumed I was still looking at the surface. He forgot that I'm the one who signs off on the safety of bridges that carry thousands of souls. I know how to find the single point of failure. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a motel and spent 12 hours on my laptop, monitoring the Caleb folder on Gideon's server. My Trojan script was already doing its job, silently mirroring every file he had on me back to a secure cloud drive I'd set up, and simultaneously planting digital breadcrumbs that pointed directly to Gideon's IP address. But that was just the legal side. I needed something more visceral. The next morning, I called Gideon. My voice was a masterpiece of tired, unsuspecting gratitude. "Hey, Gid," I said, leaning into the brother tone. "The HVAC is still making a weird clicking sound. Sloane says she can't sleep. Can you spend the night on Thursday while I'm at the site in Jersey, just to monitor the pressure cycles?" I could practically hear the smirk through the phone. "Anything for you, Cal. I'll stay over, make sure everything is tight. Don't worry about a thing." "I don't know what I'd do without you, man," I replied. I meant it. Without him, I wouldn't have known how much of a monster my wife really was. Thursday arrived. I told Sloane I had a late-night inspection. I saw her eyes light up, that flickering spark of excitement she used to have for me, now reserved for the man who was dismantling my life. I didn't feel jealousy anymore. I felt the cold, clinical detachment of a demolition expert. Before I left, I made a few adjustments to the house. Gideon had installed a high-tech smart home hub that controlled everything: the locks, the lights, the temperature, and the security shutters. He thought he was the only admin. He didn't realize that while he was busy fixing the drywall, I had mapped the electrical sub-panel. I installed a series of tiny Wi-Fi-controlled relays behind the master control board. It took me 20 minutes. Now the house didn't belong to Gideon. It belonged to me. At 11:02 p.m., I parked my truck at the end of the block and opened my tablet. The Caleb folder on the server was finally full. Gideon had finished his dossier. He had prepared a series of anonymous emails to my firm, containing the forged negligence reports. He was planning to hit send on Monday morning. He wanted me fired, discredited, and potentially jailed before the divorce papers even hit the table. I watched the live feed from the smart mirror. They were in our bed, my bed. They were laughing, drinking my whiskey, and Gideon was showing Sloane the folders on his laptop. "He's done, Sloane," I heard his voice through the hidden mic. "By next month, the bank will foreclose on this place because he won't be able to pay the mortgage. We'll buy it at auction for pennies. It'll be our house, officially." Sloane leaned over and kissed him. "You're a genius, Gideon." He never saw a thing. It was time. I tapped a command on my tablet. First, the lockdown protocol. Every smart lock on the exterior doors engaged. The heavy security shutters Gideon had installed for safety slammed shut over every window. The house was now a steel-reinforced box. Inside the bedroom, I saw them jump. "What was that?" Sloane gasped. Then I triggered the lighting loop. Every light in the house began to strobe. Not a party flash, but a jagged, irregular frequency designed to disorient. I turned on the intercom. Gideon had installed it so he could talk to Sloane from the basement. Now I used it to talk to them from the street. "Evening, Gideon." "Evening, Sloane." My voice boomed through the bedroom speakers. "I was just looking over the blueprints for the renovations. There's a slight problem with the structural integrity of your plan." I watched them on the screen. Gideon scrambled for his laptop, trying to regain control of the hub. "Caleb, what the hell is this? Open the doors." "I can't do that, Gid," I said calmly. "See, I found the server. I found the Caleb folder, and I've already forwarded the entire contents, including the recordings of your little work sessions, to your largest clients, the local licensing board, and your wife." "Oh, did I mention Gideon was married, Sloane?" "No? He's been using your consulting fees to pay off his own gambling debts." Gideon's face went white. He started pounding on the bedroom door, but I'd already engaged the deadbolts he'd so graciously installed for privacy. But here's the best part, I continued. The structural defects you forged. I didn't delete them, I just redirected them. I sent a tip to the IRS about the off-the-books labor you've been doing for the last 5 years. They're very interested in your free services. Caleb, please, Sloane was screaming now, clutching the silk robe. It was his idea. He forced me. I ignored her. Enjoy the house, guys. It's exactly what you wanted. A place where you can be alone together, for as long as it takes the police to arrive to investigate the suspicious activity. I just reported. I tapped one last button. The HVAC system, the one Gideon had used to hide his server, began to vent a concentrated, non-toxic but incredibly foul-smelling plumbing dye through the vents. It would stain everything it touched, the walls, the furniture, and especially their skin. It would take weeks to wash off. I put the tablet down, started my truck and drove away. I didn't look back at the flashing lights of the house. I had one more stop to make before the sun came up. I drove to a 24-hour diner 10 miles away, ordered a black coffee, and watched the dawn break over the highway. My phone was vibrating incessantly. Sloane was calling. Gideon was texting. First threats, then curses, then pathetic pleas. I blocked them both. I didn't need to hear the sound of a collapsing structure. I already knew the physics of it. By the time the police arrived at the house, responding to my silent alarm and the report of a potential home invasion, the scene inside must have been surreal. The interior was soaked in neon pink plumbing dye. Sloane and Gideon, caught in my bedroom, were stained a ridiculous, incriminating shade of fuchsia. The smart home was still strobing. They looked like two panicked rats trapped in a broken disco. But the real demolition happened in the digital world. The Trojan script I'd planted didn't just mirror Gideon's files. It had a poison pill function. At exactly 6 a.m., it sent a massive data dump to the state licensing board. It wasn't just the forged reports on my projects, it was Gideon's own history of cutting corners. I'd found records in his hidden server showing he'd been using substandard steel in 3 apartment complexes downtown to pocket the difference. He wasn't just a cheat in bed, he was a criminal in his craft. By 9:00 a.m., his contractor's license was under emergency suspension. By noon, his wife, yes, the one he neglected to mention to Sloane, had received a neat anonymous package containing high-definition footage of Gideon's home improvements with my wife. I met my lawyer at 2 p.m. I didn't want the house. I didn't want the memories. I handed him the deed and a flash drive. I want a fast-track divorce, I told him. Sloane can have the house, every stained, bugged, ruined inch of it. But she takes the mortgage too, and she signs a non-disclosure agreement regarding my professional reputation, or I release the rest of the unedited footage to her parents and her firm. She signed. She had no choice. She was trapped in a neon-pink tomb with a man who was now facing multiple lawsuits and potential prison time for construction fraud. 3 months later, I returned to the house one last time to pick up a small box of my father's belongings I'd left in the garage. The for sale sign was crooked in the front yard. No one wanted to buy. I didn't watch you, Sloane, I said quietly. I monitored the structural integrity of my home. When I found out the foundation was rotten, I simply stopped trying to hold it up. Gravity did the rest. Gideon wasn't there. I heard he was working as a day laborer under an assumed name 2 states away, trying to pay off the millions in damages from the apartment complex lawsuits. His brotherly handoff had cost him everything he had ever built. As for me, I moved to the coast. I took a job as a lead consultant for a firm that specializes in forensic engineering, finding out why things fall apart. It's a quiet life. I live in a simple apartment with no smart tech, no hidden cameras, no recessed lighting, just 4 walls and a floor that I leveled myself. Sometimes late at night I think about that smart mirror. I wonder if Sloane still looks into it, trying to see the woman she used to be before she let a parasite into our walls. But then I remember that an engineer's job isn't to dwell on the collapse, it's to build something better on the cleared land. The house in Connecticut was eventually foreclosed on. It sat empty for a year before a developer bought it, tore it down to the studs and rebuilt it from scratch. They say it's a beautiful home now, but I know better. Some stains go deeper than the drywall. Some betrayals are baked into the very blueprint of the soul. I'm done with renovations. I'm done with best friends. From now on,